Today I'm just the moderator. I'd like to introduce, with great honor, our first speaker. Governor Taft has served our state well. He's a two-time elected governor, both in 1999 and 2002. He's a graduate from Princeton, graduate from Yale, graduate from the University of Cincinnati Law School. He was Secretary of State. He served in the House of Representatives. With all that, he could end his career and think that he served his time with the people of Ohio, but he went beyond that, and he's now teaching at the University of Dayton. He lives in the Dayton community and gives back on a daily basis. What's interesting about Governor Taft and the words that he's going to speak to you is that he oversaw, maybe not agreed with, but at least oversaw and fulfilled his duty as governor and fulfilling the laws of the state of Ohio. 24 executions. That's 24 nights of his life before these executions took place, and I'm sure that his mind and his soul were in a very contemplative space. So with great honor, I know you want to hear him, I'd like to introduce Governor Bob Taft.
Thank you very much, John, and good evening to all of you. I want to commend you all for coming out this evening and for your interest in this very important public policy issue. I want to commend Ohioans to Stop Execution for all the work that they do, and particularly Kevin Werner has been very helpful to me in providing me the information that I need to become better informed on this issue, and that's one reason I'm here tonight too, is to become better informed and listening to our other speakers and also to all of you. When I ran for governor back in 1998, I wasn't really thinking about the death penalty. I was campaigning on education and economic development and job creation and taxation issues, environmental issues, and so forth. And perhaps one reason I didn't think about the death penalty is because there hadn't been an execution in Ohio for over 20 years at that time, because as you know, the death penalty was halted and then it wasn't reinstated until 1981. But as I became governor, my first year in office, the first cases from the revised reinstituted Ohio statute started coming my way. And very early in my term, I had my first case with regard to clemency, decision about clemency, in the case of Wilford Berry, who was a so-called volunteer, and a volunteer in the sense that he had waived his further appeals. So he felt, at least he was saying, that he was ready to die. That execution occurred, and it's then that it hit me, because with that execution and all the others too, I wasn't present. I didn't attend the executions, but one of my cabinet members did. The head of the Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections was there on site, and I needed to be in immediate telephone contact with him in the event that something would have happened. For example, the volunteer might have changed his mind at the last minute and decided not to be a volunteer and to pursue further appeals, at which point the governor would have to grant a reprieve in that case. So I was telephonically present for each execution, but that first one really brought home to me that the state of Ohio was terminating the life of a human being, and I was the chief executive of the state of Ohio. It was, of course, pursuant to law. After a decision by a jury, it was pursuant to due process, but it was still very, very troubling for me just to sense that. So that really caused me to spend a tremendous amount of time as governor reviewing all these requests for clemency, and in every case where there was an execution scheduled, there is a request for clemency. by the governor. I spent a lot of time reviewing those. The death penalty, as we all know, is irrevocable, it's irreversible. You certainly can't afford to make a mistake. So I wanted to make absolutely certain that the person accused, there was no question about the guilt, there was no question about procedural fairness, there was no question about evidentiary fairness as well, no question about due process. So I spent a lot of time reviewing those cases. At the time, my view about the death penalty was basically that it was a law that had been enacted by the elected representatives of the people of Ohio. There was majority support for that law, obviously, so it was, from that standpoint, it was a reality that we had to deal with. But at the same time, I had a responsibility as governor to make sure that no person wrongly convicted, either based on the evidence or based on procedure, was executed. Going through those cases, and also being able to reflect now that I'm out of office, I have growing reservations about the effectiveness and the necessity of the death penalty. The death sentence, as we all know, has been anything but swift punishment. The cases drag on for years through the state courts and the federal courts, and in fact, one statistic from Ohio's stop execution, of the 26 persons now on death row, 17 have been there for more than 20 years. So in those cases, the families of the murder victims are really left in limbo without any closure at all. Of course, the death penalty is extremely costly. It may cost as much as $100,000 or more just to bring a case at the trial court level with all the experts and the evidentiary hurdles that you have with that kind of a case. It's a two-step process. And it's so expensive that many Ohio counties simply can't afford to do it, which of course creates unfairness. And it is clear that the death penalty is not being administered consistently or without discrimination across the state of Ohio. As John said, perhaps not intentional, but the results are discriminatory. Whether or not a death sentence is sought appears to depend greatly on the personal views or preferences of the county prosecutor. And there are huge disparities across the state, again, documented by Ohioans to stop execution. The rates vary tremendously from county to county. In Montgomery County, for example, if you look over the last several years, the rate has been less than one death sentence per 100 homicides. In Trumbull County, more than 7 death sentences per 100 homicides. So a rate that's 7 times greater. Lorain County in northern Ohio has a ratio of over 5, Butler County over 4, but the point is there's huge disparity among these different counties, which means that there is an arbitrariness and a lack of fairness in the process. There are also racial disparities in the application of the death penalty. One study concluded that the death penalty is 2.5 times more likely to be sought if the victim is white. So as I think about these kinds of issues and problems with the death penalty, my thinking has really evolved, and I would like to, this evening, urge Ohio legislators to move forward and implement immediately 2 key recommendations of the task force on which John served. And that task force, he talked about it, but it was very representative: judges, prosecutors, defense attorneys, legislators, legal experts from the law school. They spent 2 years reviewing the implementation of the death penalty across Ohio and made, I think, over 50 recommendations. But 2, I think, are really important, and ones that the legislature should act on. First would be to exclude from eligibility for the death penalty those defendants who suffered from serious mental illness at the time of the crime. This is a recommendation that has been endorsed by 24 statewide associations, and I commend State Senator Bill Seitz and State Senator Sandra Williams for introducing Senate Bill 162, which would actually implement that recommendation with regard to those suffering from mental illness. Unfortunately, that bill is still pending before the Ohio Senate Criminal Justice Committee, but it really should be adopted given its strong support and the very thoughtful recommendation from the task force that John served on. The second Supreme Court task force recommendation that should be adopted, and John mentioned this too, and should be adopted without further delay, is to eliminate felony murders from the category of offenses to which a death sentence can be applied. These include felony murders in the case of kidnapping, rape, aggravated arson, aggravated robbery, and aggravated burglary. They do account for the vast majority of death penalty cases in Ohio, but the conviction rates are not very good on those cases. In fact, less than 7%. And these cases are also a major cause for the huge geographic disparity from county to county, where it's almost, whether or not, if you are charged with aggravated murder, whether or not the death penalty applies to you, should depend on, obviously, which county you happen to live in. It's also a cause for significant racial disparities as well. According to the Ohio Public Defender, Tim Young, the death penalty was sought in 25% of rape cases when the victim was white, but in 0% of rape cases when the victim was black. So that's pretty stark. I think it's a good time for the legislature to act right now. Executions in Ohio have been on hold. This is the second year in a row that none will be conducted. Ohio, like other states, is having extreme difficulty procuring drugs for lethal injections. And for a variety of reasons, there have been very few new death penalty convictions in Ohio. I think if my numbers are right, something like 10, only 10 in the last 4 years, which indicates how arbitrary and inconsistent and unfair the application of the death penalty is. Increasingly, county prosecutors are taking advantage of a bill that I signed when I was governor that allows them to seek life in prison without chance of parole for aggravated murders, which is certainly a very heavy punishment for a crime. So I think it's time for the Ohio General Assembly to act. I know all of you, I'm preaching to the choir probably, and you've been active, I know, but I would really urge you to communicate in this election year, before the election, with your state representative and your state senator, and encourage them to move forward with these recommendations from this Supreme Court task force, and particularly with regard to those suffering from mental illness, and also with regard to the felony murder category. These are solid recommendations from this task force. There's no reason to delay further. Thank you very much.